Right, so we have a few tidbits on the M2 MacBook Air covering the release date and the mini LED panel, so let's delve into this report. But first, make sure to like and subscribe, and with that being said, let's just tuck in. Right, so the source of the information is Minchiquo, a very trustworthy source, so yeah, we can trust this information. Anyways, delving in, the first thing to note is the release date. Minchiquo in the past has said that we could see it in 2022, but never gave us a specific time frame. But now he clarifies that yes, we should see the M2 MacBook Air in mid-2022. Now guys, I can't lie, this is surprising news to me because I was actually assuming we were going to see the M2 MacBook Air release in early 2022 because we already know that we should see an iPad Air 5 and an iPhone SE 3 in spring 2022, and so I thought we were going to see a massive March event covering the MacBook Air, the iPad Air, and of course, the iPhone SE. But I guess not, because if Minchiquo is correct, then mid-2022 means that we could see a WWDC release for this new MacBook Air, which I guess is somewhat plausible. Now, I can think of two reasons why the release is happening a little later than expected. Number one being the fact that maybe Apple wants to space out their releases, especially with the MacBooks, because we know that we should be seeing a new MacBook Pro with M1X later this year, so maybe Apple does not want to release M2 too soon, since releasing M2 a few months after M1X can seem a little odd for some consumers because 2 is higher than 1, and so that might make some people think that M2 is better than M1X, which we know won't be the case, but of course, regular consumers don't know the nitty-gritty details, and so yes, I think Apple wants to space out the releases and release the M2 MacBook Air a little later than the M1X models we should see at the end of this year. But another reason that Minchiquo even mentions is of course the mini LED supply constraints. It's the reason why the M1X MacBook Pros are yet to be released, and so it seems a ton of Apple products are getting pushed back because of the mini LED production issues, and so it's pretty logical to assume that the M2 MacBook Air has also been affected. Talking about the display, that's the next thing Minchiquo delves into, because yes, we're gonna see mini LED on this MacBook Air with M2. Right, so in case you don't know, mini LED is what's in the current 12.9-inch iPad Pro and basically offers the best parts of OLED without the compromises that also comes with OLED. So you get the colors, the higher contrast ratio, the amazingly deep blacks, but you get higher brightness compared to OLED, and of course there is no burn-in. So yeah, this definitely will be an amazing display and it should be a massive upgrade over the LCD panel we have on the current M1 MacBook Air. Now guys, I can't lie, a part of me still refuses to believe we're gonna see mini LED and a redesign with the MacBook Air, because if you take a look at the past, the MacBook Air rarely gets new features immediately. For example, the 2016 redesign to the MacBook Pro only came over to the MacBook Air 2 years later, and so I'm a little skeptical that Apple's going to be giving the MacBook Air such improvements this soon after the release of the M1X MacBook Pros, but I guess with Apple Silicon, Apple wants to redesign all their Macs, and of course we have heard about mini LED and the new design coming to the MacBook Air through various sources, and so yes, I guess we can be sure this redesign is going to happen. However, I do want to say there is a chance this might not be the MacBook Air, because in these renders from John Prosser you might notice there is no tapered design that's synonymous with the MacBook Air, so there is a chance that maybe this is just the MacBook and the MacBook Air we have today stays as a separate product in the lineup. That's just a theory I have, but let me know your thoughts on it in the comments below. But coming back to the mini LED panel, the other question I have is, what are the differences going to be between the MacBook Pro display and the MacBook Air display? Because obviously Apple isn't going to give the cheaper MacBook Air the same exact display as those higher end MacBook Pros, and so there has to be a caveat with the MacBook Air's display, and I think that might be the brightness, much like we've seen in the past. So I'm assuming the MacBook Air display can't get as bright as the M1X MacBook Pro. Now the next tidbit that's pretty interesting is the fact the screen size will remain at 13.3 inches. Now this is surprising to me because I was actually assuming Apple was going to share the same 14-inch mini LED panel across the M1X MacBook Pro and the M2 MacBook Air, because of course that would prove to be cheaper and more efficient. But I guess not. Apparently the MacBook Air will remain at 13.3 inches, and I guess that means the footprint of this MacBook is going to be much smaller because obviously they're retaining the same screen size, but they're shrinking down the bezels, and so maybe this M2 MacBook Air could be closer to the 12-inch MacBook in terms of size. I think that would be really nice, and in a way it would be the 12-inch MacBook reborn, so yes, I am completely on board for a smaller MacBook. Now the final tidbit Quo mentions is that we should see an upgraded Apple Silicon chip in this MacBook Air, and that's pretty much stating the obvious because we all know we're going to see the M2 in the MacBook Air, and of course, as a refresher, M2 should have a very similar layout to M1, so 4 performance cores and 4 efficiency cores, but instead of 7 or 8 GPU cores, we should see 9 or 10, so yes, there should be a pretty decent GPU boost with the M2. And do remember that M2 is based on A15 cores, unlike M1 which is based on A14 cores, and so that should give the individual cores a slightly higher base clock speed. As for other details on this MacBook Air, we all know it's going to be incorporating elements of the 24-inch iMac's design, so white bezels, a white keyboard, those funky colors, and overall a more consumer-focused design philosophy. And while I know some of you guys might not like this new design, I think average consumers are gonna love it. Price-wise, I think it's gonna be around $1,100, purely because of mini LED and the new design, but also Mark Gurman has said that this will be a higher end version of the MacBook Air, so expect Apple to keep around the base M1 MacBook Air as the entry-level option. Anyways, are you gonna buy the M2 MacBook Air in the near future? Anyways, thank you for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe for the latest Apple news and rumors. Check out the video in the clip above on details regarding the M2 MacBook Pro, and on that note, I'll see you guys in the next one. See ya, peeps.